Okay, so same thing with chapter 8. I'm going to kind of give you some helpful hints. And this first problem that you're working on is actually number 20 in chapter 8. And there's a lot of um, questions that you have to answer, but I'm going to help you a little bit with the journal entries. And so it asks you to do the journal entries for each of the events for the city. And so the first thing it tells you is that the city assessed levies totaling $5 million on properties within green acres. Let me get to the right page. And where you're going to want to look back in the chapter to help you with this, you're going to want to look back at page 313 to help you with the assessments. And that one's pretty straightforward. And then in the second one, it says that all assessments associated with the current year's installment were collected, as was the interest due on the unpaid installments. And it tells you that a portion of that was reclassified. So cash was collected, so you're still going to be on page 313. And again, just trying to help you out, so hold on just a second. So your current was $500,000. That's given to you due to special assessment bondholders. That is going to be also on page 313 where you're going to be looking. And that amount is actually going to be $250,000. And so you should be able to see how that is calculated. I think you see that in number 1, the 5% interest. So again, also going to be on page 313 where you'll see that. And you can see that reclassification on page 313 as well. Then in number 3, it says the first principal payment of $500 was made to the bondholders. Also on page 313, you're going to look for that one. And then in number 4, all additions and deductions were recorded by the custodial fund. And we can aggregate those. And so you're going to see that on page 313 as well. So everything you need for that problem is on page 313. And then you ask a couple of questions and you can work through those. Okay, then the next one you have is number 22. And this is an investment trust fund, and this is the Albertville City Council. And again, we're going to be doing some journal entries. So for this one, you do the journal entries on February 15th to record their participation. So you're going to look on page 323 for this. You'll have a journal entry for City of Albertville General Fund. You'll have a journal entry for Albertville Schools, and you'll have a journal entry for Richwood Township. And these are all very similar to what you're going to see on page 323. Where you're going to have that debit to equity and pooled investments and the credit to revenues change in fair value of investments. And so you're going to see that on all of those. Also credit to investments. So that's what's going to look like on those. And then in B it says, prepare the journal entries to be made on the accounts of the investment pool trust fund to record the following transactions. So in the first one, you're recording the investments transferred to the pool. You're also going to find this on page 326. You're going to have that debit to U.S. Treasury notes and that debit to, actually look on page 324. Well, hold on. Yeah, 323 and 324. You're going to need both of those. And then on over to 326 is another place that you're going to want to look at that. You've got a due to the city's general fund. You've got additions, deposits and pooled investments, Albertville Schools. You've got additions, deposits and pooled investments, Richwood Township. You've got a debit to U.S. Treasury notes. You've got a debit to certificates of deposit. And so that with page 326 should help you. Now on part 2, The $30,000, you're going to need a little bit of calculation on that. Let me get on over to that one. Let's see what they give you. Okay, this $30,000 right here, you're going to need some calculations on that one. So open up in an Excel spreadsheet so that you can kind of see what you're looking at here. You've got equity at the beginning of the year. Got the interest rate. And then we have Treasury note distribution. Don't worry about what all this is yet. You'll see, I'll explain it to you after we get it all typed in. Then we're going to have some withdrawals. And then we have equity in pool before interest. And then we have interest again. And then we have an interest distribution. Okay, so this is all of this based on the city's general fund, the schools, the township, and then we have the total. So with the equity at the beginning of the year, and this comes from your information that's given to you, I'm just putting it in a different format for you that I think will help tremendously. In the township. And then we can total all of these. Wasn't what I wanted, so we'll just type it in. There we go. Okay, so interest, what we're looking at here is what percentage of interest do we have? And so we need this information to allocate. Okay, and then these are going to be percentages. Okay, so then the Treasury note distribution, this $30,000, this is why we needed to do this. That's how we allocate that. Then I made that absolute, so I can carry that across. Okay, so that's the information that you actually are going to need for number 2. And you'll have a due to general fund, you'll have additions to Albertville schools, additions to Richwood Township, and that information is what you need to answer those. You'll also have a debit to cash, credit to certificates of deposit for the $3,010,000, and withdrawal from pooled investments for the Richwood Township $3,100,000 as well. Then in number 3, you're going to look on page 326. In number 4, you're going to look on page 328. And then in number 5, we have undistributed earnings on pooled investments. And again, we're going to need this chart. And so we've got this withdrawal that we just talked about. And that's a total of all the withdrawals. There was only one. I'm going to show it to you that way. And then we have our equity, and so for this, it's going to be our equity at the beginning plus our Treasury note minus any withdrawals. And no, we don't have one there, but I'm going to go ahead and carry this across. Okay, and then I think I can go ahead and carry that on over. Yep. And then I'm going to do my interest again. And so again, I'm going to have what percentage, carry that over, and then my interest distribution, it told you that the distribution is, defined it, see, that's number 5. At the end of the year, undistributed earnings were allocated to the investment pool percentages. So that's what we're doing right here is we're allocating. And our allocations come from our undistributed earnings on pooled investments from number 3, the $50,000, and number 4, the $28,000. So $78,000 is the distribution that we need to allocate. So we use those percentages to allocate that. And so our 78,000 times our applicable percentages. And then I can carry that over. And those numbers are what you're going to need to do the journal entry for number 5. And then in C, it asks us to record. I'll go ahead and close this. It asks us to record the June 15th increase. So that's your $3,000, your $14,100, and your $12,900, and then your $3,100,000 that we calculated in our Excel spreadsheet. And then in D, it asks you to, I don't have a page number for that one, but it's all in that same area. It asks you in D to, let's see, record the change in each participant's equity and pooled investment account due to the September 15th Treasury interest and December 31st interest accrual. So this is D. And so our equity and pooled investments revenues and our equity and pooled investments revenues for the school, also for the township, those numbers all come, if I can pull it back up, that's these numbers right here that we're going to be using for letter D. And then E is just, I think, a multiple choice question. So then your last problem is pensions. And so for this one, you're going to want to look at page 338. There's a schedule of changes in the company's net pension liability and related ratios. Now, you can also look back at how all of this is calculated, but this will give you a really good idea of how it works. So what you're doing is you're plugging in missing numbers. And so I can see from my example on page 338 that my interest is added in to get this net change right here. I can see that my benefit payments are subtracted, so I can figure these two out pretty easily. And then once you've got your beginning and your change, you have your ending. And so this is just calculating and playing with the numbers and learning where things are. This one's not hard. Just follow the example on page 338.